This is the sixth in a series of resources that consider supply and demand. Part 1 looks at the law of demand, defining the law and providing the context from which we derive the law. Part 2 of the series considers the law of supply, providing the same analysis as in Part 1. Part 3 combines the laws of supply and demand to find the point of equilibrium and considers what happens if either quantity supplied or demanded change. Part 4 of the series looks at price floors and ceilings, which are government imposed constraints placed on the prices at which goods may be sold. Part 5 inspects those factors in the marketplace which may change the overall demand for a particular good. Part 6 considers what can change the overall supply of a good. The final resource in the series inspects the interplay of changes in demand and supply and determines what would be the overall effect on the equilibrium price and quantity supplied. As we saw in the last resource, a number of factors can change the demand for a product. There are also many factors that can change the supply of a product. It is important to remember as we look at these factors that supply comes from the viewpoint of the producers of the product, whose main focus is to make money. We will focus on some factors that cause supply to increase. Many of these factors increase supply as a result of lowering some cost of production. If a product costs less to make, then the profit is greater. This in turn leads to a higher supply. So what can lead to a lower cost of production? It is possible that workers' wages may decrease, or perhaps the cost of raw materials or other capital decreases. Another possibility is technological advances, which makes the production more efficient and thereby lowers the cost. However, not all increases in supply are because of lower cost of production. Supply would increase if government subsidies increase. Another factor is expected future price. With supply, if the company expects the future price to drop, then they will increase the current supply to take advantage of the current higher price. One final factor is if the number of producers increases. If more companies exist to create the good, then the overall supply of the good will increase. It is essential to distinguish between a change in quantity supplied and a change in supply. A change in quantity supplied occurs when the price level changes. A change in supply is a shift in the entire supply curve for one of the reasons we discussed earlier. But how does a change in supply affect the equilibrium quantity supplied and equilibrium price? Let's find out. Suppose a major technological advance happens that lowers the cost of production for some good. This results in an increase in the supply, which shifts the entire supply curve to the right, while the demand curve stays stable. This leads to a new equilibrium point. Compared with the original, the new equilibrium price is lower than the original. However, the new equilibrium quantity is higher than the original. What happens if the supply decreases for some reason? Let's say that a newly unionized workforce has signed a new contract that significantly increases their wages. This increase in wages makes the good more expensive to produce. This results in a decrease in the supply. Therefore, the supply curve moves to the left. What happens once a new equilibrium is reached? Because the supply decreases with the same demand, the equilibrium price will increase. And because the supply decreases, oddly enough, the equilibrium quantity also decreases. So let's summarize. If the supply increases, which means the supply curve moves to the right, the equilibrium quantity increases and the equilibrium price decreases. If the supply decreases, meaning the curve moves to the left, the equilibrium quantity decreases and the equilibrium price increases. But what happens if both the supply and demand change? Stay tuned to the next resource in the series.